listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Under the Puppet is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who support the show over at patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. Welcome to Under the Puppet, the show that talks to professional puppeteers about the art and business of puppetry with the sole purpose of helping you up your puppet game. My name is Grandpa Choco, and this is Under the Puppet. Hello, friends. Welcome back. I am so excited for our interview today. Our guest is a puppeteer who really needs no introduction, but I'm going to run down a few of his credits anyway. He was the bodysuit performer for Earl Sinclair on the Dinosaurs. He originated the Muppet characters of Bobo the Bear, Johnny Fiamma, and Pepe the King Prawn on Muppets Tonight, and he has stepped into the enormous shoes of Jim Henson by taking over the roles of Rolf the Dog and the Swedish Chef on the Muppets. Of course, I'm talking about the one and only Bill Barretta, and here is his interview. It is my honor to welcome to Under the Puppet the one, the only, Mr. Bill Barretta. Bill, welcome to the show.
It's called Under the Puppet?
It's called Under the Puppet.
That's good. I like that.
That's the little name I came up with.
It's clever.
Well, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's start at the beginning. What is the first puppet you remember seeing?
The first puppet I remember seeing. I don't know if it's the first, but it's the one that's the most memorable that would have been around that time, which was Guy Smiley.
Guy Smiley.
Yeah.
And you just connected with him right away, the character?
Yeah, I mean, he was insane.
Yeah.
I had never seen anything like it. He was crazy. And I was just drawn to it. That's just the one I always wanted. Every time I would watch Sesame Street, I would hope that he was going to be on. I didn't know anything about, was there regular characters? You know what I mean? You're little.
Yeah.
And I just always hoped that that's who was going to be on every time I went to watch Sesame Street. So yeah, Guy Smiley for sure.
And I know from, kind of knowing you and knowing your brother as well, that you guys did a lot of creative projects on your own as kids and growing up. Was puppetry involved in that?
Well, Gene is 4 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I tell this story often, but it's true. So he really was the one who would come up with whatever we were going to do with our lives, right? So if he thought we were going to make movies, then he would get a movie camera and figure out how to do that. If he wanted to figure out how to animate something, he's the one that would do that, and I would kind of assist or become a part of it in some way,
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point he was really curious about puppets, and he wrote to Jim as a kid and to find out how do you make a Muppet. And Jim sent him back a letter with instructions. There was like a thing that showed how to make a Muppet, and that's what he set out to do, and I basically followed.
Mm-hmm.
I have an older cousin who's closer to Gene's age, and the two of them really were the ones who figured out how to build them, and they designed them and built them. And then my aunt Kathy, who was a deaf-mute teacher, I don't know if my brother asked or it was her idea, but we went and we would do puppet shows for the kids. And I remember we would do things to music. There wasn't dialogue really. It was mostly music and confetti flying and, puppets hitting each other and
like
stuff
sort
like
of
that.
Salmon Friends type.
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah, that kind of just silly little quick storylines, that just, with a punchline to it. And she would turn the speakers to the floor so the kids could feel the vibration of the music, so they could connect with what was happening with the puppets. And really, I would only say that lasted maybe a year at the most, that kind of ongoing interest,
Mm-hmm.
And then, we would do shows for our family, too. Our family was this Italian-American family, and every Sunday, 30 people would get together and eat, and there were 9 cousins, the little kids, and we would do a show for the family, and some of it was puppets, and some was dancing, and some was acrobatics, and it's like a little variety show.
Right.
So the puppets would would sometimes appear there. But after that, I never really thought that this is what I would be doing. I never thought that I would be a puppeteer, or that puppets would be a part of my life. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer. I knew I wanted to do something in that world, but I didn't know puppets. And it's funny, my mother, whenever she would travel somewhere, or even in where we lived, if she saw a puppet or a marionette, she would get it for me. Wow. And so I have a bunch of different puppets, but I never, I like played with them, and then that was kind of it.
Yeah.
They were in my room. I never really, this isn't really what I thought I'd be doing with my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know your first job with the Jim Henson Company was on Dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
As a bodysuit performer for Earl.
Right.
How did that job come about? I mean, were you doing puppets before that, or is that just the first thing?
No. I was studying at the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York. I went there for 2 years and was fortunate to study under Sanford Meisner the last few years of his life. Which was a whole other thing in itself. But I was, I wanted to be an actor and pursue that. And I decided after living in New York for a couple of years that I kind of wanted to get out of the shadows and the subways and go somewhere where the sun was shining all the time. And so I moved out here and lived in North Long Beach because my cousin had a house that I was able to rent from her. And I would drive from North Long Beach up to Los Angeles. I was a carpenter down there, and then I had a waiter's job up here, and I was just trying to make my way, And Brian and I have been friends since we were 17, and this was the same year his father died, actually. I think I moved out here in October, so his father died in May, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
And so I moved out here, and then he came out here, and he said, I'm coming out to LA. There's this show that I'm going to do, and told me kind of what it was, and we were hanging out at my house in Long Beach, and I said, if there's anything I can do, I'll pull cables, I'll do whatever, just to be around it. I need to be around the business. And he said, well, I don't know. But he said, there are these suit characters in this show. And I don't know if it's something you'd want to do to be inside of a suit. But I've seen you do Jackie Gleason, Ralph Cramden, and there's this character that's kind of like that guy.
Yeah.
Maybe if you want, you could come and audition for it. And I was like, oh, see, I almost said a naughty word on your podcast. But I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I had seen I guess it was that after the first Ninja Turtles movie, I guess, right? They had already done the animatronic head on a human body, right, in a suit. So I kind of had an idea of what that was. But I went and I shaved my head because it was about this dinosaur, so I wanted to look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I didn't know what kind of dinosaur he was. And so I took my acting stuff, which was all about behavior, right? So the Sanford Meisner method, it's all about behavior and reacting moment to moment and, interpreting the dialogue through behavior. And I thought, well, that's really exactly what this is, because I'm not doing the dialogue. I'm doing it in my head and I'm interpreting it through my body, but I'm not the one who's saying the words and I'm not the one who's moving the mouth. And I thought, okay, sounds good to me. Little did I know, 3 years later and, 80 pounds a day on my body. Yeah. But it was an amazing show. I loved that show. The group was unbelievable. Everybody, Alan and Bruce and Misha and Julianne and Brian and Mac Wilson and Dave Goles and Steve Whitmire. It was just an endless, amazing, talented group. And then there were the voice people, that were great too. Great matches.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what this question was exactly, but it had something to do with dinosaurs.
Well, I want to spin off of that is, and I've asked this question on here before, and I think I know from your answer your previous answer what your answer is going to be for this. But do you recommend acting training for puppeteers?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there are different people who come from different places, that are great puppeteers, and not all of them are trained in acting. Some just have a knack for, an innate kind of way of understanding performance and that sort of thing. I don't think it hurts. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like for me, I like the idea of grounding a character, as much as you can in reality, so that the puppet is as real and grounded as can be, and then on top of that putting the insanity or the craziness that there's an expectations about puppets, that they're fantastical in a way,
mm-hmm.
But for me, I still use those tools every time I look at a script.
Kind of spinning off of that, for the Muppets, you've created several characters over the years: Pepe, Bobo the Bear, and Johnny Fiamma. Could you kind of tell us how you go about creating one of those characters?
Sure. Different ways for different. Like if you talk about those three, see if I can quickly break it down. So they're all based on people that I know or have been related to. So I find something, that person sparks something, that I go, oh, wait, what is that?
Yeah.
And for example, with Pepe, he's based on my wife's aunt, who was from Spain. Her name is Maria Teresa. And I noticed that she would always speak in statements. She never really asked questions, and she would always end those sentences with okay. It was a statement. She'd say, we're going to the mobile, okay? Okay. She'd say, open the door, okay? Okay. And I just said, well, that's an interesting thing. And then the more I got to know her, there were other traits about her that were interesting. A very kind of mischievous, funny lady, and her voice was really funny to me. And her laugh. She had a great laugh and very contagious. And she didn't speak much English. So when I was with her, and I don't speak much Spanish, our conversations were basically, she would start off in English and then go into Spanish and telling me something that she thought was hysterical, and then I would laugh and she would laugh. So she would say, hey, Peter, we have to go. And she would just go, and her belly would, bounce, and so there was a character right there. Yeah. And then how that evolved into the fact that it was a King Prawn was based on collaboration with other people, Kirk Thatcher and designers, who designed what he would look like and who built him, and so that became a collaboration. With Bobo, he's probably just more like me, and that was a puppet that already existed. Mm-hmm. Pepe didn't. There wasn't a puppet, and that was a bear from some other Henson projects, and I don't know. I was just drawn to him for some reason, and he's probably the most like me. Mm-hmm. That's just kind of me, I think, for the most part. And then Johnny is based on my father and my grandfather, and the Rat Pack era, and a little bit of De Niro from Casino. I grew up in an Italian American family, and I just love the idea of a guy who thinks he's a contemporary of the Rat Pack, but it's pure fantasy, and he believes that he knows them, that they're very close friends, and he still lives at home with his mother, and so it comes from different people, and then I try and ask a lot of really specific questions, which is something I learned in school, acting school, but also Frank Oz is would say, ask yourself a lot of questions, very specific questions. What kind of cologne does Johnny like, and where does he live? What kind of car does he drive? What does he have for breakfast? What's his favorite pasta? All these little details you don't always carry with you, but over time it becomes part of who that person is, and that helps you feed, I think, the dialogue that you're getting, so that you can go, there's moments when you read something and it may come from someone who's not very familiar with that character. They know who they are and they've watched things. And so it has a template of that character in dialogue, and there's great lines and great jokes. But then I think you have to find how to make that more specific to that character. Little things, little moments, little changes in dialogue sometimes help how you would approach it so that it becomes who that character is supposed to be.
Do you find that in situations like that, most writers are like, oh, okay, like, yeah, you can go ahead and tweak that a little bit? Or do you ever have to fight for something like that just because you're like, no, this is the character?
Sometimes, it's... I love any kind of collaboration, and I'm sure I'm a pain in the ass sometimes, because I probably have those moments where I say, well, he wouldn't say that. And then if I don't, if I say he wouldn't say that, I better have a better suggestion. To just say he wouldn't say that means nothing.
Right.
So I need to be prepared with whatever that thing is that I feel it's missing. And I may not. It may just be a feeling, and I go, and then we try stuff, we'll try a little bit, and if it's not going anywhere, then I go with what was there, and I try to make that work.
Yeah.
But most people, it's interesting with the Muppets, most people are really open because they have an appreciation for the Muppets and what Jim created, and I guess if you've created a character, then they trust you probably more than, if I'm doing Rolf for the Swedish Chef, although the Swedish Chef's just kind of a crazy person. But, if I'm doing somebody else's character that's no longer here, then I have to, I think, be open even more to other people's suggestions and ideas. And sometimes it's great because someone who doesn't maybe know the character as well as you think they should may have an idea that you never thought of.
Yeah.
It's another angle, and that could be just spark a whole new part of that character that you didn't expect. So I think it's good just to be open. But yeah, I do have, I imagine I do have those, he wouldn't do that, he wouldn't say that. But I try to be prepared for whatever.
To say why.
Yeah.
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 Well, you mentioned, you stepped into the roles of Rolf and Swedish Chef and Dr. Teeth, and sometimes that happens in the puppetry world. In all productions, somebody takes over. What advice do you have to give people who may be in that same position that you're in to step into roles like that somebody else has already established?
Kind of advice. Well, watch everything, that you can find. Listen to everything you can find. Recordings, old things that you never saw before. Definitely don't assume you know the character just because you've enjoyed them over the years.
Right.
And I think people's first instincts are to maybe it's more so with puppets, I don't know, maybe just generally, to hear, it has to, people want it to sound like what they remember it sounding like, what it feels like to hear that voice. So obviously the voice is really important. But I think under that you have to figure out what the essence is of that character, And if you've try and find, if you can, interviews with those people who've talked about those characters, so they have maybe a little bit of insight of where that character came from for them and how they talk about them, and just try to absorb as much as you can out there about that character, and then just work the shit out of it.
Yeah,
constantly. Just when you're at home, just be that character, while you're making something. Talk about if you're making a recipe, and just be that character making that recipe, and just constantly do it. And even with that, then there's the time that you get to spend actually performing it, because chances are you're not performing it that often, right? So if there's a project that comes up, then maybe you're doing a 6 or 10 week run of it, or if you're lucky, right?
Right.
But if you're going in and you're just doing a quick interview, that's not a lot of time to rehearse with the puppet, and that's a whole other thing in itself, is getting used to how that feels and how it moves. Study the way the character thinks. Watching Rolf think, is really interesting and fun for me, to see Jim pause and think and take moments, and so that's, I guess, kind of, I don't know, is that advice?
Yeah, no, that's great. And is there a point where it kind of becomes your character a little bit, like where you feel that you can, staying true to what Jim established, but you can kind of like, here's like you were talking about before, add a little tweak that maybe you didn't realize before?
Yeah, I think you have to. I think at some point you have to stop beating yourself up and saying, this, this will never be Jim's Rolf. It's just impossible. There's no way you're going to ever be that person's character. So you're doing at best, hopefully a good imitation, and then just, I guess, a part of you has to at some point become a part of that character, without spoiling it, and trying to keep the integrity of what was originally created. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it has to. Otherwise, I think you can never really be in a scene or ever really be that character, because you've got to at some point stop thinking about it.
Right.
Which is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard because, people, there's obviously you get criticized for things, and there's things that everybody has. It's interesting with the Muppets, everybody seems to have their special feeling about what these characters should be. So when you do a TV show, Kermit wouldn't do that. Piggy's too much this. Gonzo isn't quite that. Pepe, everybody, Ralph isn't quite. And that's because people remember, they have their memory of it, and you're trying to please, millions of people's memories, and it's impossible.
Yeah.
So at some point you just have to say, this is who the character is as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys enjoy it, and hopefully it's entertaining.
Yeah. You have served as Muppet Captain or Puppet Captain on several Muppet... General? Muppet General. Oh,
yeah.
Promotion. Yes, sir. Muppet General, Puppet General. But can you talk a little bit for maybe people who don't know what that job entails?
Well, it's changed over time, but I think at this point, when I'm doing that job, it's kind of the liaison of the Muppets to the production, right? So, and especially if you're working with a crew or director or producers that aren't familiar with the process of what we do. Yeah. So I kind of, how could I put it? So there's all these different departments. There's set design. There's production designer. There's the director. There's the workshop. They obviously know what they're doing, but there is coordination that happens between myself, the workshop, and the production itself. So I'm kind of like a octopus that reaches out to these different departments to help bring it, in a sense, all together collectively for whatever we're going to shoot. So, are we using steel deck to get the actor up on that? And how much do we need? And what space do we need for the puppeteers? And where are the monitors in relation to that space? And how high is the desk? And do we need chair backs or do we need the full chair based on what the shot is? Sometimes working with the director, making little suggestions about, even a better angle on a puppet because it doesn't look great from this angle. Mm-hmm. You're not getting, if you try coming from this way, because this puppeteer is left-handed and it might be better to have him turn in and grab that thing. What do you think? Blah, 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 blah. So in a sense, I'm kind of this central collaborator that tries to get everything to kind of come together with, obviously, the help of all of these people and all of their art and all of their contributions and collaboration. I'm just kind of in the middle of things, and that starts with pre-production and talking about, how the sets are built and just being sometimes a liaison just between the puppeteers and the director or the producers or the writers. So it's kind of all encompassing in a way without sounding like a, pompous ass, but it's just that's just the nature of the position.
Right. Well, it's like at the production meetings, you're the puppet representative, kind of there going like, oh, if we do it this way, it'll work better for the puppeteers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the voice, and like Jane Gutnick, who's the supervisor of the workshop, she and I together really are become that team in a sense representing the Muppets.
Yeah.
But then there are things that she goes off and does on her own that are specifically to the workshop and the characters. And then there's stuff that I go off and do specifically that are related to the sets. And, it does cross over a lot.
Right.
But, yeah, that's kind of the idea.
And one of the positions as puppet general that you have...
You didn't salute.
I'm sorry. Let me stand up.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thanks. At ease.
Thank you. Is like you kind of are like, okay, well, if you have a team of puppeteers and you're like, okay, you're going to assist with this person, you'll go over here. What qualities or talents or traits do you look for in puppeteers to fill those positions?
That's a good question. And you know what? I didn't. There's just one other part of, I think, of that coordinating thing, if I could just add, is for example, on the show, each scene has certain characters, and each scene requires a certain amount of people to fill those characters' positions. So I created with my assistant, created a list of all the characters, and I'll be like in any normal production, they each have a number. But what I do is I break down a scene based on who's in the scene and how many people I need to support those characters based on what their action is. Some characters only need one puppeteer. Some might need 3 because that character has to pick up a cup of coffee and pour it into the sink, right? So that's part of it as well, is figuring out, because you're dealing with budgets, right? So every day you have to know how many puppeteers you're allowed to use based on what the budget is, and figure out, do I have enough, and am I estimating enough ahead of time so that we don't go over budget? So that's the other part of it, is figuring out who's doing what and when, and who do we call in to do that stuff. There are certain people that have been working with what I'll call the core Muppet performers, and who are very used to each other, right? So certain people are very used to having their right hand performed by a certain person because they know their timing, they've possibly doubled for them. They don't have, the communication to achieve something is less. You don't have to explain everything. So I keep in mind who those people are for those core Muppet performers. And I guess what I hope is that we find people that are selfless because, right-handing or assisting or doing background characters or doubling is kind of a selfless thing. You're not really getting a chance to do dialogue, but if you want, you can certainly be upstaging. That's kind of fun to do. But I guess I just look for people who are collaborative. It seems to be a key word for me, but collaborative, good timing. Someone who knows when to get in the way and when not to. Somebody who's just open to ideas. People who have ideas, and aren't afraid to step in at the right moment and suggest something. People like me.
If you could clone yourself.
If everybody could be me, I think everything would be fine.
Yeah.
No,
know exactly what you're thinking.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Sure.
I mean, I could say talented and they can sing great and they do great character voices, but to me, it's it just comes, I think, down to instincts and collaborative, open.
Yeah.
And having skills, of course. You want people that are able to assist well or know how to make a character look like he's bent over to pick up a piece of bread or a coin off of the floor. Obviously the skills are really important.
Yeah. And
lip sync and all that stuff that you would assume is not something you would have to mention.
Right.
But it's, there are different degrees of it, and there are different people who are better at certain things than others, and sometimes you have to remember, oh, you know what, they were great when they did that thing. We've got to get them to help us do this, and
right.
So it's just a matter of keeping the little library in my head, I guess.
You mentioned assisting other puppeteers and how important that is as a job, and a lot of I found a lot of puppetry work is assisting. You're not necessarily the lead character and everything. Yeah. Why? What do you think puppeteers can learn from assisting?
Everything, because you have to. I guess you learn patience. With production, that not everything happens real fast, and then hopefully you have your time eventually to be in the position of doing dialogue or whatever, performing a character. But I think hopefully you're taking away with it the experience of learning how that person who's doing that character is executing it. How, what are their skills? Are you getting something from from them? Everything that I do is I've learned from other people. Mm-hmm. I watch the way Frank does things, and I watch the way Jim, and I've watched Steve and Dave and Kevin and all those guys, Jerry, and I've taken pieces, from working next to them. One of my favorite things I've ever done was a character, a blind Pew in Muppet Treasure Island, where I was the hands for Jerry Nelson, and he was a blind character, and he trusted me. He I was new. It was my first movie, and so I wanted to discuss the hands. I was like, Jerry, what if I grab, this and I do a little bit of that? And he was like, do whatever you want, man. So whatever you think, just stay with me. And it was interesting because there was a little bit of a back and forth of who was leading because he was blind.
Right.
So I had to try and not get in his way, not get in the character's way, but find the right moments. And there was a moment where he's talking to Billy Connolly, and it's kind of this close-up of Billy. And Billy had these long ringlets, his hair, and it was kind of an intimidating moment where Blind Pew's leading into him. "We're not happy with you, Bill." And I grabbed one of his curls, and I just kind of twirled it in my finger, and it was just a fun little moment. So trying to find those little details to help support that character is, I think, a big part of that learning experience. When do I do that stuff? Is it too much? And just always checking in with the person who's doing the character, because it's their thing and they have ideas of what they expect. So.
Yeah. Now, you've done both scripted and improv stuff, for example, with Puppet Up, with the Jim Henson Company. Do you prefer one or the other?
Well, I think the difference for me is that with Puppet Up, you have a certain window, right? So you've got about, depending on how long they let it go, let's say 2 to 3 minutes, right? Would you say that's about average, right? And within that window, as you know, there are certain parameters to pleasing the audience in a live situation like that, right? So you've got to start with this, you've got an objective, and you've got to kind of find a way out, hopefully, without pushing it, without, forcing it, making it feel organic and improv. And I like that part of it. I like the live feel of it. But I think I personally just prefer exploring characters more than that. To me, the character's there for a moment, and that's fun, but my preference is to develop a character further. And so I guess scripted is my preference, but they're both fun to do, that's for sure.
And there's certainly a lot of sort of improv stuff happens on the set anyway, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, my ideal preference is to improvise around a script, to find someone who's open to letting you improvise around that material, and find, just have some fun with it and play with it and see if there isn't somewhere else you can go outside of what is specifically scripted. But yeah, so that's it's a combination of both, I suppose.
Yeah.
But character-wise, I think I prefer something that I can develop.
Explore and
develop and get deeper, and not just a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah. What is something that you always bring to the set with you to make your job easier?
Condoms.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong puppetry circles.
Yeah. It's filthy.
Dirty. Oh, okay.
It's a filthy place to work.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's the question? What do I bring?
Yeah, like is there something you always throw in your bag to take with you to set to make your job easier or make your job better? Maybe there's not.
Not that I can think of. I mean, other than my script and the notes that are in it, because I do like to think about the script a lot and things I'm going to be doing, and maybe some suggestions if I have them. But other than that, no. I mean, you mean like my watch, like a favorite watch or something?
Yeah, your lucky watch. Like people say, "Oh, I bring highlighters and a red pen because I like to circle stuff," and like that kind of thing. Or deodorant was a great answer as well. Condoms. There you go. That's it. When you're writing notes on a script, do you write like directly on the script? Do you have your own little journal that you write stuff in?
On the script.
On the script, just directly in there?
Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah, and because then I tend to use that when we're shooting, right? I'll take those pages out of that script and fold them and tape them to the monitor, so I have those there.
What is the best piece of puppetry advice you received that you still use to this day?
Well, here's one. I don't know if it's the best, but it was at the time. And and I imagine, I think it's a puppetry-related thing. It had to do with dinosaurs. And even though I was in this suit, this really was basically a giant puppet.
Right.
And the fact that I was in the suit and wore this animatronic head, you know, like my eyes were in the mouth, right? So I had to figure out how to make, you'll see like the first season, I suck because my movements are too big, they're too fast, you know, there was no weight to the character yet. And his head, I think, feels disconnected from his body. And Frank said to me one day, every once in a while, do something like touch his chin. You know, reach up and touch his, connect the head to the body, you know. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of understanding more, you know, of understanding, okay, I get it. The head's separate. I see it now. I'm connecting it more like people do. We all reach up and touch our face and scratch our chin or whatever we do. And then that started to get me to think, okay, this guy's like 600 pounds or however, I don't know how heavy he would have been, thousands of pounds. So I need to think about that when I'm moving my arms, you know, and my legs and his walk. And so that was a great piece of advice. And then I don't know if someone, you know, this is something that no one's ever said to me, but I think if you're working with the Muppets, you absorb it from the other performers. And that's a sense of play, you know, to have fun, to not take it too seriously. That's just instilled in everyone, which I think has come down the pipeline from Jim. You know, those lessons that everyone learned from Jim that maybe weren't spoken but learned by example continue to be passed on. Mm-hmm. And I think whatever all those different things are, you know, as you're working together and you're playing, you pick up that stuff, and I think you don't necessarily realize it in the moment, but it becomes kind of a collective note. You know, Jim is a kind of collective note, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
What has been the highlight of your puppetry career so far? I mean, you've done so many great things with celebrities and all that other stuff. What has been the highlight?
It's hard. First thing that pops in my head, Tony Bennett. Muppets Tonight, getting to work with him, you know, an idol. Getting to work with Brian, you know, the idea that these two dopey 17-year-old kids that smoke cigarettes and worked at an amusement park ended up working together. You know, whenever I get a chance to do that, that's a whole different great feeling for me that I don't get to have all the time. So that experience, you know, I mean, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for him, you know. He was the one who, obviously, I told you, asked me if I wanted to come on audition, and he, you know, he told me when I auditioned, they were deciding on who would play Earl, and he and Michael Jacobs, who were the executive producers of the show, decided to watch the auditions without the sound on, and I guess Michael's the one. Michael. I guess Brian told me Michael ultimately said he kind of decided that he thought that I should be the one, and I think Brian tried to stay out of it because we were such friends, you know. Mm-hmm. But after Dinosaurs, his support to bring me in on other things and keep me coming and doing some background stuff and allowed me to get to this point, you know. So that's a big highlight.
Yeah.
Brian is my highlight.
He's a good guy.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a highlight. Tony Bennett's a highlight. You know, you just kind of, sometimes you just meet people and you don't really get to spend time with them as yourself.
Right. I was going to ask that question.
Yeah.
If that happens. Yeah.
Oh yeah. You know, and like me, you know, Ringo, you know, Pepe interviews Ringo. Like, how bizarre is that?
Yeah.
But it's, the interaction is there. And the fact that it's not a scripted question and I'm just riffing
with him. Yeah.
You know, that blows my mind that I could be there with Ringo.
Yeah.
Michelle Pfeiffer. Oh my God. You know, the most like stunning woman, amazing actor. And that was a great experience. Prince, you know, watching him perform, that was incredible. Sandra Bullock was amazing. Just a playful little girl kind of at the time. You know, I say little girl, but, you know, just I don't know, what was the big action film? Speed.
Yeah.
Just after Speed, you know, and she's young and fun and new and crazy. And there's, God, I don't know, there's too many.
Yeah.
There's too many. I just did a thing with Alicia Keys, which was a blast. Just to hang out with her. She was so cool. You know, such a earthy person. Whoopi Goldberg, down to earth. You know, her and Pepe are engaged. Like, you know, that she would agree to go along with that and play. There's just, I don't know, there's so many different things, so many different stories for so many different people. It's hard to pick out the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, what is your favorite puppet character that is not your own?
Well, you know, it's like a bookend. I mean, Guy Smiley.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man.
And we have you back on sometime.
Thanks, and hopefully we're going to be playing together soon.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bill Barretta. I hope you got as much out of that interview as I did, because it was pretty amazing. For links to Bill's IMDb page and a video clip or two of his work, visit the entry for this episode number 6, over at underthepuppet.com. Huge thanks to Bill Barretta for being on the show. Well, now it's time for the next step in your Puppeteer action plan, and this one is a fun one. I want you to watch your favorite puppet-based movie or television show, and I want you to find the most complex piece of puppetry in it and try to break down how it was accomplished. Now, you may be lucky to do a little digging on the internet and find out exactly how it was done, but even if you can't find anything at all about it, try to work it out. How many puppeteers were needed? How are they positioned? What types of puppets were used? Breaking down a scene like this will help you figure out the same questions when you are working on a puppetry project yourself. Now, of course, you should always watch puppetry projects for enjoyment, but you should also put on your critical thinking cap and try to work out how some of that magic was created. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Under the Puppet. I welcome your feedback via email at hello@SaturdayMorningMedia.com or via Twitter, where the show is at username Under the Puppet. I want to hear your suggestions for questions I should be asking and for future guests. Also, the goal for this show is to talk to puppeteers making it happen in all sorts of styles of puppetry. So if you know an amazing bunraku or shadow puppet artist, please reach out. Let me know who I should be talking to. Thank you so much for listening. Talk to you next time on Under the Puppet. Under the Puppet is a production of Saturday Morning Media and is made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Myrn Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Stephen Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Pachoco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Carrie Whitney, Chuck Tomasi from the Technorama Podcast, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wobschall, Twitter user Butzengear, a.k.a. Wildcat, Eve Cunning, Mike Hamilton, Gaston Moreno, Reed Loveland, Ivan Asquith, Vanessa Whitney, Nancy McCarthy, Janine Lee, Peggy Etra, Kristen Hogan of Squid Friends, David Akers, and Zoe Palladino. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your monthly donation today. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. And while you're over there at iTunes, be sure to click that subscribe button. That way you'll get new episodes the moment they are released. Under the Puppet is copyright 2017 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Pachoco, executive producer. All rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com. You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.